Okay, welcome, Bruce. Bruce Lyon. Thank you for joining me today. You're joining from your oasis in New Zealand, correct?
Yep.
Yep. And
And
I've
I'm excited to share this theme with you. There might be a little bit of a delay in the broadcast because it is beaming around the world. But yeah, this is a subject dear to both of our hearts. And I think we talked about before, like sometimes I feel like I'm in possession of a secret that it's impossible to tell.
exactly, which is why I wanted to have this conversation focus on the money piece and living differently, living templing, living as a soul, the money, peace, and spirit, the money, peace, and abundance. And these are the not so well kept secrets, but the secrets that are really difficult to crack for us as individuals and collectively. But it's what we are being invited to do now, and many of us are kind of on that edge of jumping. Do we jump? How do we do it? I don't know. Oh my God, scary. And so there are people who have walked before, and you are certainly one of them. I think it's been at least the past 2 decades that you have been in relationship with the money piece and temples and the sacredness of land and emerging the new world, but with a money piece in particular. And so that's what I'm really excited about.
Well, actually, it's been much longer than that. It's just that it took me it took me a couple of decades to try doing it the other way. And of course, that's what everybody wants. Like, why it's so scary is people want to know what's the way. Like, give me the path, give me the teaching that I can follow, and if I just follow that, then like it's all going to work out. But of course, the answer that nobody wants to hear is you have to be the way. Like it's not something that you can create. You actually have to live it. It has to transform your own being. You have to be the temple if you're going to create a temple. And so that's kind of much harder than like egos doing something, even making a difference or making a contribution. Is like when you have to be the difference, your essential being has to be it. You're all in the fire with it. Like mostly I was about 15 years that I tried to find every other way but that way, because including like trading financial markets and like going and getting the money first, and like I try to enroll other people. All of those things are ways that people normally start. Like try to get something outside of yourself to generate the resources in order to create something. And I think for me, the realization actually, it really came when I was broke and living in a van, and I didn't have so much to lose anyway. But that realization, like, oh hell, I've got to be it. Like it's got to start here. And so this is part of the secret that's hard to tell is that when you make yourself the source, then you liberate yourself from fear and you liberate your money from fear. But of course, in order to liberate yourself from fear, you have to feel the fear. And so that's the thing that people are trying to avoid, because that fear is very close to the fear of death and the fear of not existing and the fear of not surviving. And so it triggers very deep stuff. I often say it's easier to do your sex work than it is to do your money work, because it's much closer to the feeling of death and dying. So I guess you know something about that.
Yeah, actually, I want to comment about what you just said of it's like, yeah, it's easier for us to kind of open our pants, unzip our zippers, than to let somebody or let temple or let land or to give of our wallets. It's like our pocket is like, oh, but wait, no. Um, and and it's what I have faced. The biggest fear for me, I remember actually came with Haydn. It was actually when it was there wasn't any fear in giving, actually, because I knew, like, there was just that call, there was that moment, of you said it needs help to land, and I was like, this has to happen, and everything I have is for this use, and I just knew that, and nothing really got in the way. But then actually the fear came when you said, is it okay if I list your name as one of the investors, publicly? And then I cringed and I was like, people will know I had money. People will know I made money from, being a facilitator. People will ask me for money. People will, and I was like, oh my God. And I was just watching myself, listening to myself. And I was like, all he's asking for is, like, can my name be listed? So I'd like to hear also from you, like, what were some of the fears? I mean, I know it's been a long journey, but some of the key fears that came up for you around the money piece, because I know it's different for different people.
Yeah. I mean, so man, part of the freedom around money is being free from all of that blah 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 blah. It's like sexual fantasies, like, but they're like money fantasies. Like and I've always had them. I remember when I was merchant banking, to have money for my kids and so on. And I used to dream about like taking the hundreds of millions of dollars that were coming through my hands and using them for something else. And then guilt of having money, guilt of not having money, shame about having money, shame about not having money. Like the whole thing is just like crazy stuff that goes on inside. And so for me, like the deep truth that I've always known, particularly at this time, is there is only one safe investment on the planet, and that's the future of humanity. And temples, like the idea that we can somehow hoard money out of fear to look after ourselves because we're afraid of dying, and that's going to somehow help, is an illusion. However, it's an illusion that everybody wants other people to be free from, but they want to feel safe. So you're locked. I was locked in my own prison of my own fear. And the own thing of like, I have to look after myself, like it didn't matter that my parents, my father had money or something else. I had to look after myself, and so that fear that I wouldn't be able to look after myself if I opened my heart and gave was huge. And it just seemed like rational thinking, like good thinking. So it took me quite a while to actually realize, well, actually, it's not about the money. It's about life, and it's about living according to my values. So I often say, the first step for anyone who's trying to involve themselves in the temple is free your own money. Give your own money to your own temple. Even if you're too afraid of being manipulated by things outside of you, give it to your own heart. Give it to the temple of your own being, so that it's not being used out of fear in your own being. And better to give just a little bit cleanly than a lot. I remember the story of what's her name, Mother Teresa, when she met some guy, and she was building some center, and he was like, I'm going to go back to the States and I'm going to raise $1 million for this thing. And she's like, forget about that. What's in your pocket? Like, put your hand in your pocket, and whatever money's in there, give it. Like, she knew that actually you've got to prime the pump. All temples need sacrifice, and if you can't prime your own pump and then demonstrate that when you prime your own pump, that it works. You have to demonstrate that for yourself before you can ask others. And for the first decade of trying to land temples, I sat around in circles of people who all had clever plans, that somebody knew somebody rich, or somebody had a business proposition, or somebody's father or uncle or something was going to like be lured in to fund it. And it never amounted to anything until one day I sat down with everybody and said, okay, how much do we have? In the room, if we're going to do an audit, what do we have? And if we're not using that, if we're not giving that, then how do we ask, and how do we actually follow this idea that everybody has, that the universe is abundant, and if you start running current, then the current will come? You've got to actually test it and prove it. But the mind is so clever. Like, people would always ask me, okay, but where did the money come from? So they were like thinking if they could trace the river to its source, but the source is the mountain that the rain fell on, like there is no source. The source is the rain, So I know in my life, the time, the moment, and I was a bad example, because I clung on to everything until my fingers were like locked. I know the time in my life where I decided, okay, I'm letting go. Even if I'm a bad lady in in a third world country, if that's where I end up going, then screw it. I can't be in the fear anymore. And actually, when I first came to Haydn, and Haydn really just said to me, like, will you take responsibility for this work? And something in me just said yes. Before any of my mind could kick in or anything else, I just said yes. And that was the moment, that was the source of my wealth. It doesn't matter where the rain came from or the rivers arrived from, it's those moments. But you can't tell that to anyone who doesn't have those moments. And unfortunately, that happens privately in the core of your own being and your own heart and your own conversation with God or the goddess, your own decision to liberate yourself from fear around money. It's an intimate and beautiful and terrible place. So that's the first step. Like, you can't get a little bit pregnant, you can't engage the temples without them wanting everything from you, not because like they're mean and evil manipulators, but because they want your freedom. You can't be in the temple unless you're free, and unless you're free around money issues. And the best way to be free around money issues is to give your money to what deeply matters at the core of your being. So I say, first of all, liberate yourself and prove it. Once you give, miracles start to happen. If you give cleanly and purely to the core, then you prove to yourself, oh, I see, I'm freeing a current inside my being that can run more and more cleanly. And it's not going to run cleanly from the start. It's going to take time, like a river, to clear. Once you've proved it to yourself, then you can ask us. But you can't beforehand, because otherwise your energy is shamanically saying, I haven't given, but I want you to. So you've got to give first, and then you can ask. And then when you're asking, a lot of what I'm doing for people when I ask them for help for the temples is, I know I'm money laundering. Like I'm money laundering in a good sense, in the sense of, like, I'm taking money that's locked in fear and I'm liberating it into love and the affirmation of life. And it doesn't matter whether they're giving it to the temple that I'm holding, or whether they're giving it to their own project or their own heart, or something else that lights them up. They're liberating money. So the liberation of the world's money, which has to happen soon because it's pretty well going to become useless fiat currency before too long. So the liberation of it is the first step around money in the temples. So maybe you could share a little bit about your journey with that, and then we'll go on to some of the other steps that I've discovered.
Yeah. I know that this thing that you're saying, that, people have to know it for themselves. You can't, it, and what I have found in this journey, because now I'm on the other side of it, being on the side that was giving was actually easy for me. And I know that sometimes the asking is difficult and sometimes the giving is difficult, or the receiving is difficult. So for me, the giving was easy, because it was like, I've always known that, like, I can attract money. It's okay, and money will come. And I gave everything. And I remember my partner at that time saying, you don't do that. And I left 5,000 for myself. And he was like, you don't do that. And I was like, if I need money, will you lend it to me? If for whatever reason I can't earn more in enough time. And he's like, yes. And I was like, okay, cool. So it's like, not a problem. So giving was actually easy for me, but asking for money. And then somebody pointed out, like, thank you for giving me the chance. Thank you for giving me the chance to be a part of this, or to donate, to contribute, to stand with this. And I remembered, why was it okay when Bruce asked? I didn't judge that. And I gave. But for me to ask, and that's also part of the liberation of money, is to be able to ask and to be able to receive it. And it's okay for me, to go into trade and exchange, to offer sessions, to offer events, to offer, as fundraising, da 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 da. But to just ask and say, hey, anybody want to stand with this? And then what really has broken my heart has been, receiving, like, like, there was a post that I made, and I got like 100 and something comments of, well wishes and celebration, and like, oh wow, this is when we signed, and we got the keys, like, it was that moment. And it was at the same time asking, like, okay, now we've secured it and we still need money for renovations, and not converting that congratulations, that whatever, into €1 €5, €10, 10,000, 50,000, whatever, but not standing with money. And that sense of like, this project is so big, what can I do? My piece doesn't matter. I'm not important enough. I'm not big enough. I'm not strong enough. All those stories that we have that then turns into whatever in relationships, and also about money, where you can see it most obvious. And me trying to tell people like, hey, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to release €1. €1, release it. Like, just let it flow. Believe that it will, I even made a post that I can buy 2 mugs at the charity shop for €1. Each one costs 50 cents. That people will drink here. Pilgrims who come here will drink from. And, it was just this like, come on, like the apathy or the helplessness, or the you do it, the whole sixth ray version Piscean of like, you're gonna hold that, you're big enough, you're important enough, you've got it sorted, you whatever, and we'll just come and drink from that well. And I'm like, be part of that well. But then people of course are like, oh, she's trying to like swindle me out of my money. And I'm like, oh, how do I do this? I swear. And you're right. The point was to give first. So Timo, I've given everything, and I still am. And Timo gave all his savings, all his his gold watch, his retirement plan thing, his passive income. At first, it was looking like he didn't have to because other people were going to step in. It was the same thing like Haydn. And then somebody pulls out, and it's like, oh, okay, how do I come up with the rest? And like, actually, I have reserves, and this was my safety net, and so that wasn't going to be touched, and now it's being asked to be touched. Then he's like, okay, I'll sell that too. Okay, so sell the home, sell the business, sell everything. And then, is it enough? Yeah, it was just enough. And then, will others stand? And I think that was the point where that was hardest for me. I think I hit like one of the darkest moments when I felt like others weren't standing with money when we had stood so strongly. They're just waiting, kind of, like wanting to be a part of it, but not that €1. And so many wishes and blessings, like they all are in the cloud, like please anchor them into ground with money. And felt like, this is too heavy. This is heavy. We can't shoulder this. We can't do this, just the two of us. It's so big and so heavy, and we were never meant to do it alone. And it was that moment of like, yeah.
That's the point. A temple can't be done alone. Like you have to, you have to ask, otherwise there's not a temple. And like, you asking was my most difficult point. And I even had backup plans where I would just mortgage, everything, or go to the banks, or, like, I didn't want to ask for help. I can barely ask for directions when I'm lost, let alone ask people for financial help, And I remember actually, Ohad and Dawn was staying with me here on the island, and an investor pulled out, and I came out, and I was like, I've been in the whole process of like, what am I going to do? And they said, hey, we got 50 grand, we'll put it in. I just wept. And then you put your money in, and I'm like, oh, I see. Like, this is the way it has to be. You have to open your heart, and you have to know that you're not standing just for you, you're standing for these other people, and give them an opportunity to come stand as well. So I feel like the first step is like give, and then the second step is ask, and then the third is receive. Like, that can also be tough, like to actually receive without trying to give back, or, make it okay or have strings, but to actually receive, allow that money to come to rest and be held as a sacred trust through your own being.
You had this, Dawn and Ohad, I had this moment in that dark moment. I was really like, okay, the apathy, the helplessness, like I like, okay, like, and it was this feeling that I've had since I was a teenager, since I was 12, where my I and being able to put it into words, that one of my deepest fears is that humans won't care. Souls won't be activated enough, won't have enough of a voice, won't have enough of a say, and humans won't care. And that was like, to feel that, and it, tied with money, you know, care from the heart, sure, but take it down a few chakras and care that way, care, you know. And two women stepped forward in that within 24 hours of that, of hitting that and really being with that. And they both said, what you're doing is something I had wanted to do but couldn't do, or tried to do and it didn't work out, it was messy, or you know, whatever, it fell through. And I don't need to do it. It doesn't have to be under my name or my way, but you are doing it. I want to put my money with you because you're doing it. And it was this moment of like, oh, this work, especially because I've been focusing on the cross for these past few years, of the masculine and feminine, of the feminine saying, you know, we are all interconnected. It doesn't have to be my brand, my name, my location, my, you know, it's not that. It never is meant to be that. If it's that, then it's not temples. And then the masculine saying, and I stand. I stand. And then letting that soul piece come together and to penetrate the piece of the scarcity of my way, or I gotta, you know, my name, or my, whatever, or protect myself or fend for myself, or, you know, my rainy day I may need, or whatever, it's gotta penetrate. And in those moments when those two beings came, that I've known in different ways in different parts of my life, I was like, wow, this is actually the world that is here. Is here. Yes, there's all these other things that I'm looking at and I'm feeling, but there's also this. There's also this that's happening. And it was, yeah, it was like that moment for you with Ohad and Don and me and many others who were like, oh, and yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you remember that, you remember those, right? Because they're the high risk moments, you know. And I have to say to you, like, you ask really well. Like but I also feel that you do. You ask really well, but I feel like sometimes you're in your masculine asking, and I can feel underneath what it costs you, you know, like, and that place in your heart, just how painful it is to like open yourself that vulnerably to want help. And you know, for me, like, I remember the time that I sighted breath of fresh air. I'm like, oh my God, these people are trusting me. Like, I'll risk everything. I don't care. But these people are risking with me. And and if it doesn't work, they're risking, and I'm somehow responsible because I've sounded the note. You know, I've led the charge. You know, and so when I got to that point where I'm like, not only is everybody safe, they're going to make money, and it's going to flower into more temples, and you know, miracles have happened. I mean, like, for me, when I started this path, I thought I would crash and burn a long time ago, and yet I've been supported and helped and you know, growing in the process. But I always remember those people who took the first risks with me in every new adventure, because they didn't know. They just had their response to the life that was sounding through my being, and they risked. And then it's easier later when it's for sure going to work and so on. But right at the beginning, when you're just alone, like, those are lonely and deep and powerful times. So I know you know about those, and it's already starting to move into its next phase, but they're intense and they're initiatory.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning about the masculine and yeah, it's like I don't feel I ask well. I feel like I ask clunkily and awkwardly and clumsily, and I feel like sometimes I'm demanding and I'm like, can't you see? And other times I'm just in like almost giving up of like, okay, I just, you know, forget it. Like fine, we'll just do it alone. We'll just do it shorter. Like I'm just like pendulating inside of me, and it's like so difficult. And others have actually come to support and be like, okay, let me start a GoFundMe campaign for you, and another one of like, how do can we, you know, make this in a way that's you know, like, she comes from a business background, and so not to make it into a business, but to hone in some of those gifts, you know, to surrender it to soul. So like things that I have no clue about, I'm just like, look, obvious, this is the world, give, duh. So yeah.
think that's a good segue, because the way the business world works is they have the structure and the plan first, like they have a good business plan, and then they try to implement it. But of course, the way the temple works is like you've got to have no plan except your life given. And then when it starts to flow, then you can start to build the structures. You can't rely on the structures at the beginning. The structures have to reveal themselves later. So that's probably a key difference. And so a lot of people come and try to give you good business advice, but there's a time for that, and that time is not actually in the fire. Those are the times when you have to be in the fire. Later on, you can form the structures, and there are economic structures that we're finding and developing as we go along that actually help people. And particularly once you get past that first stage where it's just the pioneers who believe in it, and then it goes into people who genuinely are less risky with their money, and so they want to have some kind of structure. So you can form ways of people being involved at the level of risk and the level of reward, but the reward is not a return on investment in terms of money that may come. The reward is in that liberation that I talked about, that absolute feeling of you earning your own liberation from fear around survival that comes in the core of giving. And then the other thing I want to say along with the structure is that there's another deep source of support, and that's the land itself. That if you are really working with templing and you are drawn to a piece of land, that land has resources in it that can absolutely support in the money coming in. It's like the energy of the land rises up through your body, and the land talks. You're just like a reverse lightning rod for the land, so that humans and financial resources can begin to pour in. And I know that in my two major experiments with anchoring temples, at both times I felt the land come through me. It was just basically saying, look, don't get too aggrandized as being a human who's doing this. It's like, we just need you, the land needs you and heaven needs you. Just stand between and let magic do the work, rather than, getting lost in your head and a business plan or whatever. So the earth itself is an enormous source of support for anchoring temples. And that's why it's really important to find the right piece of land where the land wants temple, and therefore the land is going to use you to support the process. That makes a huge difference. And again, that's hard to tell people that have raced off with a real estate agent and want to do something by next Friday. The land itself takes time to unpack its mysteries, and if it does, it brings it's an abundance that is unbelievable unless you experience it.
Yeah, the first piece of what you mentioned about the business plan, and it's like, when temples are about landing soul and spirit at the core of that, and it's not the clever idea, it's not the resort by the beach because this is like where everybody will want to come to because it's winter. I mean, I'm in Finland. And I'm like, it'd be much easier to do this in Portugal, in Greece. I could name you 10 other countries where my body might also, think it's nicer sometimes, but definitely be easier to sell in my mind. That's what my mind says. And that it's an all inness from the soul. And that includes the money, that includes everything. And it's not about whether we're going to make a profit. It's not about the structures, as you said. It's about, do I make a life of this? Do I surrender to this? Do I become this? Do I live this? Do I breathe this? Is this what I'm here for? And for me, that was clear since I've met you. You supported through whatever moves through your being, supported to bring that out in me. Not because you were saying it, but because it's like a spark. It's like, oh, that's alive in me. It just hasn't ignited. And it's not because I'm going to follow Bruce and what Bruce is saying because he's charismatic or he's fun or whatever. It's like, oh no, actually I'm one of those. You are. But that's not why. That's not sustainable. And so it's like, in the beginning, those who feel that call, that soul call, which is different than the trade and exchange, is different than what's going to be the investment, the returns on my investment. It's different than that. And going in with those people, being backed by those people, because you're backed by soul. Soul is backed by soul, and then it's backed by land, as you said, or land is saying, hey, actually, I'm the one who called you. And I keep saying this, where I'm like, Nikkila chose really well with Timo. He put in his money. He's an architect. He's a builder. I mean, like, she chose like incredibly, and me as well. But I give so much credit to Timo, because the credit is due. And it's like, it just chose really well. Now the question is, do you hear? Are you willing? And so the land here is like, for us, it's a like, the first time we drove through, it was just this like we felt like, you see in the movies, there's this like kind of like see-through bubble thing that you pass through, and it goes and you pass through to the other side. It was kind of like that. It felt like that. It was like and we got to the other side. We're like, oh. And yeah, this was it. Like, there was, and we're like, okay, like, really, it's double the money than we have. It's, do that. And he's like, yeah, but we love it. And I remember one point sitting here and saying to him, like, I want to love this place. Like, I want to love it the way I love you. Not I want to, like, I wish to fall in love with it, but like the way I love him, the way I actively love him. Like, that's how I actively seek to love this place. That's what it calls in me. And yeah, so I think, to comment a little bit, to talk about the all-inness of the soul, and how that is so different than the trade and exchange, and the what's in it for me. And we already discussed that. But the way temples are landing is when souls are standing and saying, yes, take of me, use me. I'm a vehicle.
Yeah, and I think something you raised is really important, is that if you are being used by something for the collective, it's not really necessarily going to conform to what you want, as a personal self. Like, I don't know, I spent a year looking for where the temple was landing in New Zealand, and I kept looking at on beaches. I kept looking in the north. I kept looking where the part of me that can't live far from the ocean, wanted. And of course I tried to like put those aside, but actually they're there, and you can see those in an extreme situation where somebody's like, well, this is my land and I'm going to make it available to others. Okay, but if you're really giving yourself, it may not be what you want. And the first time I walked onto Haydn, even though my soul said yes, my personality is like, fuck no, I don't want to be in the cold Manawatu too, like miles from the ocean. It's like, I must have got it wrong, And the ironical thing was, after Haydn didn't work the first time, or after it worked for 3 years, I ended up coming north and actually living on the very place that I would have, chosen for a temple as a personal self. Like, it has everything that my personal self wanted. So that taught me that you don't lose your personal self when you do transpersonal work, and you have to include it. But it's better if you go transpersonal first, and then your personal gets given. And so my encouragement actually for people landing temples is make sure you attend to your own personal. And I even think at Haydn, anybody who wants to come live there, they all need their own little place, their own individual place where they can be king of their own domain, whatever they say, because the personal self is a beautiful part of our being. And if you don't have that, well, then you get martyrdom and burnout, and then power struggles and so on, as everyone tries to bring their personal choices in and get them met. So I think it's really important, if you're doing a transpersonal temple, that there is space, at least a small space, a postage stamp, like one little piece where each individual can be in their own personal sovereignty. So yeah, the land is a support, and then the way you are on the land is the giving of the soul first, and then making sure that you do attend and love your personal self so that it can also have its own happiness.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to that, because that's something it's difficult to explain. You know, the all inness doesn't mean I forget about the personal. So I remember having this conversation with Timo, and we were like, okay, you sell everything, everything is given here. We have a section where we live, and that's it, and everything else is, you know, is offered to the temple and the collective. But we also have our refuge and the cottage, and like that's for the personal. That's like that's our little cave, let's say, and that's not on this property, that's by the sea. And like, okay, that's our little cave. And it's, I remember when one of the first times when we came here, and we were at that place where we're going to reserve for our living, because we'll also be living here, and he was looking at the lake view, which is behind me from there, and he was saying, yeah, well, if you cut those trees, then you have a better view. And I looked at him and I was like, and he looked at me, he's like, what? And I was like, and that day, like, I have rarely seen this in Timo. He just was like, "Grrr," like, who are you to tell me that no, I will not cut those trees? And he had to face that. And we were here, and I was like, how can you do that? Oh my God. Like, you know, I was going into my little thing of like, this is a temple. And he's like, and then by the end of it, we were sitting at the stone circle, and we had, you know, it was, I had cried, we had gone through a process, and he was like, yeah, I came, like, I want to dominate, I want to rule this place, like, I want to, you know, make it what I think is best. And actually, I'm its servant, and this is not m- my kingdom. And he really got it. And it was so amazing to watch the transformation in that day, in those hours. You know, I don't know, however many 4 hours that it went through, that that piece that was challenged. And then he's like, but wait, actually, that isn't in alignment. That, and now, of course, he's like, how do we protect every, you know? And it's like, it's a totally different approach. But he had to face that, he had to feel that. And he has to have his little piece where he is, it's personal. And yeah, it's going to be Japanese style, and it's the architect's dream, and it's, you know, it's this and that right view, and da da da. And yeah, great. And no trees are sacrificed on that one either. But you know, like, it's perfect, wonderful. So yeah, that it's so
Yeah.
important.
I mean, part of the crosswork that we do, right, is the masculine and feminine. And so our old ideas of sovereignty is like you either have a king or a queen, you know, but each person needs their own king and queen, and they source their sovereignty from two places. One is that descending, you know, cosmic awareness, but the other is the land. And in fact, the Celtic goddess of sovereignty is what gave the king or the queen right to rule, you know. So the energy that's coming up from the land is as important as the energy that's coming down, and they have to marry in the heart. And then you have both the king that can hold the alignment, and you have the queen that is caring for the whole kingdom. And you know, that's also one of the difficulties when you're a couple and at the center of something is you get all of the projections of king and queen, and you know, mother and father, and masculine and feminine, all of the stuff that everybody's trying to work out inside their own being. So the crosswork is really important so that each individual can come to their own king queen in their own heart, their own spirit and matter. And then, you know, that game is over and the game of cooperating as souls begins. So, you know, these are kind of some of the steps that uncover and teach us on the way, you know, that there needs to be a new kind of governance, a new kind of economics. We're not there yet, we're still in the old system. So how do we start to live the new system and have it show us without following a map, but being the way? And one of the ways that I found is, you know, like you find little jewels on the path that go, oh yeah, that belongs in the manual for temple builders, you know. Like, how do you essentialize down these teachings by trial and error and by the fire into, that was the essence of that learning, you know? And so one of the learnings around governance is, instead of following an individual, you have to follow life. And that life is like lightning, and it dances around, and now it's here and now it's there. And, you know, like one day at Haydn, we're focused on this project, and then the life goes out of that and the life's over here. So you've got to follow this dancing life at the center of the project rather than a business plan model, which is not to say you don't have structures and ideas, but the life may not be ready for them. You know, like all of the things that I saw at Haydn 20 years ago are slowly coming to fruition in their own time and their own place. And this one gets seated for a while, and then this one. So that's one of the lessons of like how to be in the unknown and the chaos and not try to do the old model of, you know, keeping on putting the old model on top of it. And then once you get through that yourself, you've got to deal with everybody else who comes to help, who tries to put the old model on top. And then, you know, like, so you've got to go through all of the educational process. But when it comes to economics, what I found is water generosity, like to water it, to bless it, to recognize it's the currency of the soul and of the future and of the civilization to come. You know, like the old civilization is based on trade and exchange, and this civilization is based on giving. It's based on where there is giving, and that may be overt or covert. You know, you sometimes, you know, somebody makes a big deal of giving. Sometimes they're very quiet about it and even hidden. So you've got to shamanically feel with your heart, like where is their giving? And the giving isn't just human. Like where is the ground giving to plant gardens? Where is the forest? You know, like who's contributing to the temple? Who's in this council of beings of all different forms of nature and subhuman and superhuman kingdoms? Like, where is the giving now? Like maybe the angels are trying to talk to me and I'm like, I'm too busy with my business plan. Or maybe the land is calling and mushrooms are popping up and I was supposed to be going listening to the mushrooms. And I'm like, so you've got to train yourself to see where is the giving? Because of course the universe is giving all of the time. Love is just pouring out of everything from galaxies to everything is alive with love. So when we notice that and when we water it with our attention and also our blessing, so individuals that give, I watch in the temple and see who's giving without asking, like who's giving and learning the lessons that come from giving, and then say, okay, I see you're giving, I want to support that. And so this is part of the dark currency of the future, like noticing where something's given in advance, which is very different than someone coming along and saying, you know what, I have all of these skills, I'm amazing, I'm great, and you know, but I have a need to make some money and I have a need to like somewhere for my kids to be. And, you know, and then you're entering into this like trade and exchange. You're kind of having a job interview without having a job interview. And you're like, things have been offered on the table and been taken off, like a relationship before you get married, you know, and all of that is like part of the culture that is tiring. And so it's really rewarding when you feel that breath that comes, that liberation that comes when somebody just comes in and gives. And you know, whether even doesn't, if it's not sustainable, that's okay. It's like the mushrooms just growing. You give it attention, water it, encourage it, and then if you start to encourage it, you end up with a culture of giving, and people start to realize, oh, this is the culture that we're living in. We're giving. We're following life, we're giving what we can, and then we're blessing when we feel the generosity that's being given from others. So that's also part of creating an ongoing culture that's got a different kind of economics in it than the trade and exchange.
Yeah, this giving and the abundance also, that it's rooted in abundance. It's rooted in I can give. I have something to give. Just like the land, like a lot of times, because I was raised in Greece as a child, and so for me, abundance in nature means there's like fruit trees everywhere. There's lemons that you can just pick, and there's figs and it doesn't belong to anybody, and olive trees everywhere, and it's just and herbs from the it's just that's my definition of abundance in nature. But here there's a different kind of abundance in nature, and it's in the we're almost like in a bird sanctuary or something. There's like a flock of 100 wild swans and cranes, and just all these apple trees and the berries and the pines and the rock that has been here and hasn't churned because no volcanoes, no earthquakes, since the last ice age. The water, we're completely self-sustained by water that comes from the ground, You know, like it's just like there's just so much abundance, and it's just to be able to see the abundance. Even in a desert there is abundance. You know, it's just a different way that the earth is giving, or that nature is giving and is saying here, like, and this is freely given. And so to take that as an example, to take that as a model, and okay, this is freely given. I don't have to earn it. I don't have to be good enough. I don't have to be important. I don't need a, you know, certificate, blah, blah, blah. Like nobody has to approve. It is freely given. And then what? You know, and then what? And so to use that as a model of here, and again, it goes back to that, like, you know, people trying to think that, you know, trying to swindle them out of their money, or, you know, like freely give your time, give your, you know, you just want free labor, you just want, you know, and it's just like, I know, like, come on, wake up and feel that what happens to your heart, what happens to your body, what happens to your own soul alignment, what happens to your pocketbook. Because when I gave to Haydn, I mean, like, you know, and I gave everything except my 5,000, which was going to last me 2 months until I could work until my next group. You know, I never went into poverty. I never needed to borrow money. I never, you know, the opposite, money just flows. And so to freely give, and to feel the abundance, and to have that as the root, to have that as like the foundation, that again, bedrock, the finished bedrock. And so it's like, that's the bedrock, that abundance that is just life is just continuously giving, creating, even in the dead of winter of -20 degrees, it is. And to feel that, and to know that, and to be that, and to come from that, and to live like that. And so I know one of the things that you brought in, through the Master DK, has been this, you know, the dark currency. And so I know that that's been something that we've explored in smaller groups. But to, you know, what is it like to have to live in a world where it's actually sourced from a place of abundance, not a place of scarcity? And the modeling is nature. The modeling is what we've always had, always, for eons. And now we've disconnected from it, and now we've forgotten we are nature. And now reconnecting to it, and how do we live from that place, and how do we live in temple from that place? And it's, you know, again, the whole new agey thing of, like, you know, love and light, and it's not that. It's not that. It's very grounded. You know, I want to talk about how it's grounded, and how it's tangible, and it's sourced in the rain.
Yeah, well, I think you again have to go to the two extremes. You know, one of the things of dark currency is it's fiat currency. And what fiat means is the will, basically, because I say so. We all think that, you know, fiat currency is printed by banks because governments say so, but governments aren't run by sovereign people, you know, connected to the core of the earth. If you truly are a sovereign human being connected to life, you have a right to create wealth, because you're like the earth creates wealth. So the two sources of that is your own will and matter. You know, so ultimately I love a dark currency that's based on spiritual will, but also backed by matter, like grounded in matter. And we're still on the way to working with that and developing that, but that's part of what's emerging. And it links very much to what you were saying before about, you know, people are generous with their blessings, but not so generous with their dollars. And the same with the gift economy. Like, people are generous with gifting. You know what? I'm an artist and I'm going to give you art to hang on your walls. Or I'm a ecstatic dancer and I'm going to run this. Or I love gardening, and so I'm going to create, you know, and there's give and take in that. They're doing something they love, which is their passion. But not many people turn up down the street and say, you know what, my passion is cleaning toilets, or my passion is mowing the lawns, or like my sole gift to the world is, you know, so you end up with a whole bunch of people who are all wanting to give their soul, you know, gifts, but often are not willing to see that their soul gifts are also about grounded doing what needs to be done, you know. And it's better to clean toilets in a temple than it is to like be the master of the Titanic of your own ego, you know. And so much of people's contribution to the world is not yet the soul, it's their ego wanting to give and wanting to be seen to give and wanting to get recognition for giving or fame or something. And all of that has to burn. You know, so in the old days in ashrams and so on, people would be like, oh, clean toilets for a year and be in silence, you know, but we don't do that because we're in this new culture. But somewhere it also needs to be grounded. And so when you're holding point, you're so grateful for people who are humble enough to know that they're giving, you know, can go through all dimensions. It doesn't just have to be in, you know, the higher or the creative, you know, it's also in the willingness to do what needs to be done, to get up at 4 in the morning when your baby cries, to like wash the floors, to do the things that are needed to help make matter support us or shine to support us. So that's also something that we need to find new ways that aren't martyred, that aren't you know, trade and exchange, that aren't people getting something or resenting something. And when that happens at Haydn, and it happens regularly now, when it happens that a group of people just do what needs to be done, oh my God, the place sings.
Yeah, yeah. I remember the first TTT. I remember the clashes around that of like, hey, but I'm here, you know, I'm in a temple, I'm a soul, da da da. And it's like, yeah, and has anyone cleaned their room? Has the kitchen been picked up? Like, you know, like what are we gonna eat? Like, you know. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, ground, also ground. Yeah, I also wanted to speak on this, um on the dark currency. um One of the difficult things yeah, it's really hard for the mind, and so you cannot, I just say that you cannot get it from the mind. So whoever's listening, watching, you don't try it that way. Feel, you know, and just see if anything inside of you gets, you know, activated. um this watering what is already given, right? Recognizing what has already been given from that place of abundance, and moving from scarcity to that, instead of trade and exchange, which is a zero-sum game. There's this much and there's this I need this much, there's this much, I will give, I will you know, then this person doesn't get blah blah blah. So we're so used to this trade and exchange, and then to go into that space of freely giving, but then if it's recognized, it's almost like, oh well, I'm doing it so that I'm gonna get, I will get something, you know. It's so hard to get out of that loop. It's so hard to, like, you know, but I will be recognized, or I will get, you know, then I'll get a chance to, you know, be part of that other team that's doing something more creative or more whatever, or I'll be, you know, closer to that person who's in charge, or, you know, all these sneaky ways that it's still working. And so I don't know, can we talk about that a little bit and bring light to it? Because this is what this is what you're facing, this is what we're gonna be facing, is what, you know, every in the temples, that's what we're gonna be facing. So let's talk about that.
Well, you burn, don't you? You know, like I had to burn, and then it's fascinatingly painful watching people burn at Haydn, and you know, you don't even have to say anything. You just see it. It's like 1 minute they're on, you know, they're on and they're riding the current, and life is flowing, and they're in their generosity. And then, you know, something will happen, maybe it's just the natural cycle, and all of a sudden they're off. And you can feel that they're burning in there. They're burning with everything that they gave and didn't get recognized for. And, you know, like they should really be working on their career, or like they don't, you know, they can't sit and not, you know, like, but you can watch them burning. Like the light goes out, the vibrancy goes, and they're in there wrestling with their shit, trying to hide it or transform it or beat it out in pillars or something. And you just got to have patience and compassion, because we're all in it. And then all of a sudden, something will move or something will shift, and then they'll ride the current again. I know for me, when the first time I really started to do my soul teaching, it's like I'd be on, things would be pouring through and amazing things. And then I would get lost. My ego would come and try to like wrestle with credit, or I would try to like not, you know, do the next time because now I don't want to get out of the way. I don't want to die in front of a bunch of people. And so you just burn, you know, you burn and burn and burn as you're purified. And on a good day, you're really grateful for the temple because it burns you faster than anything else. And on bad days, you hate it. And on bad days, people hate me, you know, like, and I know the journey with Haydn has been over a few decades now. People often say at the end, you know, hey, that was the most intense time of my life. And I'm really glad I went through it. But, you know, at the time, I fucking hated it, you know, like, so the major thing is that when you're working with the temple, you're working with transpersonal energy, and it's not going to adjust to your moods, and it's not going to adjust to your ego. That's the whole point of the temple. It's something that's fire, and that fire is there. We come and go. Because in the world, what's happened is the sacreds had to go because we're not holding it. And when we make a temple, we say this belongs to the sacred. And if I'm out, I need to leave. You know, because you watch people, and I see it at Haydn regularly, where people have had enough. They're burned out from too much or whatever. So then they want to make the whole process wrong. They want there to be less fire in the middle and more time for personal sharing and so on. But you can do that in the world. You can't do that in the temple. The fire is going to be there at the center. So the best thing is like, take a break, go somewhere, but don't try to bring your too muchness and squash the fire. So that's an ongoing process, and it's a process around money and giving, and it's a process around leadership, and it's a process around sexuality, because these are all of the areas in the lower chakras that the soul is trying to pour itself through and land something new. So for me, they say one of your last fetters is patience. You learn one of the qualities of the will is patience, and recognizing that you're in a tidal process. The tide's in, don't believe it. It's not going to stay in forever. The tide's out, don't believe it. It's going to come back. You know, like, so these cycles of, you know, of templing. So, you know, a temple, it just doesn't happen. And now it's here and it's happy ever after. Like a temple is a life-death process that's teaching you all of the time.
Yeah, this is I think the keynote that Haydn has been for me since I said yes. However, what was that? 4 years ago? 5 years ago? 4 years ago. It was, yeah, 4 years ago in May, I think. That it works you. It works you. Yeah. And so even I'm not physically there. I was there, you know, twice for 2 months in these 4 years. I'm not physically there, but it works you. If I have my money, and I still do have, not my money, but I have money that I'm guardian of, invested there, it works me. It's and that's a gift. On most days, that's a gift. And to recognize that, and to also recognize that whatever needs to be purified will be purified, because that's the loving thing. That's what we're here for. If I wanted it cushy and I wanted it safe and I wanted it, you know, with a X amount of returns, or with what, you know, I certainly wouldn't be engaging in this. So templing and engaging in temples, whether it's you're coming here to scrub toilets, you've become an investor, a pillar, whether you're tending the garden, you know, whatever, it's part of, okay, this is part of my purification, and this is part of the purification for the collective around governance, around money, around sexuality and love. And it's a resetting. And do I want to be a part of that consciously, with my consent, like fully in like that, or not? And it's not for everybody, but when you say yes, you are worked on. And that's what people, I think it's so hard for them until they experience it. Because I had a couple people three people step forward that I'm thinking of right now, who were like, yes, I'll be an investor, I'll be a pillar. And as soon as, you know, it's like, they start getting worked on. And it's to be expected. And that's a good thing. That's a great thing. Like, wow. And expect.
Yeah, it's like people don't realize that, I mean, what you're saying to a temple is these are places of initiation, and initiation is a death and a rebirth. You know, it's a dying of the individual self and a coming into birth of the universal self through what's left of your individual self. And so you're signing up when you put a thread into that, whether it's a financial thread or some other kind of thread. You're signing up for transmission. And temple is a transmission of energy. It's not just a land and buildings, it's a transmission. And that transmission becomes more powerful than the human. Like at Haydn, at the beginning, a lot of people came for me because I'm a human sounding a note and teaching and so on. And people are resonating with something that's alive in me that also is alive in them, but they think it's me. And so they come. And there is a quality of transmission when you're teaching. But then ultimately, the place, the temple where heaven and earth meet through humans becomes a way more powerful transmitter than any human. And the individual humans start to become dispensable because they're just being used to set the vortex of a mystery school. And if you've got a thread into that mystery school, the pillar that's there, that is alive between the core of the earth and the core of the galaxy, that pillar becomes the transmitting agency. And if you've got your energy in it, you've got energy running out. And so, you know, and as gradually gets to the point where there are people like Haydn now that are like, you know, screw you, Bruce, I'm here for Haydn. Like, I'm here for this being, you know, and I celebrate that because actually that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a living thing that humans come and go, but the thing stays. And that's the deep dedication to life. And if everybody knows that when they come, that nobody is sitting at the center, life is sitting at the center. And the role of humans is to support that life, to support heaven and earth to come together through them so that when they grow that, more and more people can come dance around that pillar and more people can get the transmission of that life force. And then you know, the quality of the humans and what they're doing becomes less important than the whole living ecosystem.
Yeah, that sounds like Eden to me. And it's happening. That's the thing. It's not like, you know, this is, uh, you know, I don't know, some sci-fi. It's happening, and there are people who are experimenting with that, and there are places. And my wish, I know it's been your wish too, and I have looked to Haydn long and deep to, you know, what lessons learned, and so we don't have to recreate the wheel and go through those birthing mistakes, or not mistakes, but you know, it why not take those lessons and see what can fit. And of course every temple is different, every country is different, every culture is different, every nature is different, every you know, what it burned in you will be different than what it burns in me, etc. So we all there, you know, the constellation is unique, and yet there are lessons that can be applied. So I know with on the money piece, the investing part, and then it's like, wait, but it's a temple, and so it has investors, like people, it's supposed to make money, it's supposed to be, you know, uh, successful in that way, but isn't that the old paradigm? And like, you know, facing those discussions, and then also the other side of like, yeah, I want to invest so that I can, and it's like, yeah, well, no, not that either. And so, you know, that being one of the huge pieces that through your exploration, and not just this last round, but you know, previously, of how yes, it does need to be it does need to be self-sustainable. There's nothing wrong with it being financially successful, and that is part of the abundance. And what I'm excited about also is that, like, how do other, without taking away that learning process, those birthing pains from other temples, but then also creating some kind of, you know, financial web that includes support, and that money can go to different temples that are being established, you know, some kind of dragon fund or some kind of, you know, dark fund, that helps in that way. So, you know, feeling that balance of like, not, you know, it's like you don't open the cocoon because the butterfly will never be able to fly. You don't carry the turtle out, you know, it has to do like that through the sand, and as painful as it may look, and it's part of that birthing process here on this planet, and that's part of the souls being birthed, our souls landing into matter, and yet also taking these lessons learned around the money piece. I don't know if you have more to say about that.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. That the last thing first, that Aquarian culture, it's us. There's just one of us landing these temples, and it kind of doesn't matter whether one's landing in 20 years or 50 years or 100 years. It's all the being of the world soul landing the temples. And so Haydn, on the one hand, it can be like a mothership because it's landed and it can support. On the other hand, it's just the one that's closest to matter and manifestation. It's a seventh ray temple. And so the other temples are supporting, even if they haven't landed yet, that flowing energy. And when one does land, then it gets support from the matter before. And this is just so different from how we're doing in ordinary culture. It's like all of these people I know in New Zealand who had free education in universities and now have wealth from property. They're now making young people pay for their education and take out huge mortgages and so on. That's the very opposite. It's not about enabling the generations of temples to come, but it's about supporting them and recognizing that the wealth is shared and the process is one process of them all landing together. So I would say that's one of the things that defines kind of Aquarian culture, is that there's a natural sharing because there's a recognition of what's alive in the center that we're all serving rather than our own little kingdoms. So there's that piece, and then the other piece I've lost, but it will come back to me.
Okay, that's fine. I wanted to also talk about because there's the power of the temple itself, not the temple itself, the land itself, and there's also the power of the humans and how they collaborate. And you spoke about the will and the what's coming through the nature, and it's not the will of the personality. This is what I want. It's not that will, and there's also the transmission of those who are holding point, who have surrendered, who have given all, who have said, yes, this is my life, or this, I am this, I become this, I become that tree, basically. Then the energy that can flow through those people to others, and then they become, as you said, like pillars are transmitting, right? And so I've plugged in like my battery needs to be charged, so I plug it in. So I plug it into a temple, and first it was Haydn, now it's Nikkila, and there will be others. I plug it in, and then I receive this, but it's also then I become part of that being plugged into, and then I also give, and that is what I have received from you. I can say that when you offered the dark currency, and it was life that was moving, and you were just speaking for it, I had this like a portal that opened for me. It lasted a few days, and I just recognized, just yeah, it was like a it was like being on a trip. I don't know. I cannot really explain it, but being like boundless of time and space, of form, and yet moving through all of it, and just the capacity to move, and from that ancientness, from that that yeah, hard to put into words what happened, but I know, and I didn't see you, I didn't speak to you. You took a picture of a piece of paper that you scribbled on in your kitchen, and you sent it in a Facebook chat, and that was it. And that was enough to open this portal. And I just want to, I'm not saying this like, oh look, Bruce has magic powers. I'm saying this is our destiny as humans, is to open up to more and more of being transmitters of life. But first we have to surrender that bit, everything we've been talking about up until now, so that this can flow through. And there is no fear, there is no scarcity, there's no, it's the opposite of everything that might be holding us back. And I just wanted to share that personal example, and to name that this is what happens when you then take a pillar position, or a transmitting position, you hold that as like, yeah, that I'm willing to take the responsibility for that, and I'm willing to step aside enough for that. And then how that can affect other humans and the land itself then, and it becomes this whole dance.
This is this is the will, like when you truly stand in the will of the soul, the universe writes you a check for the level of will that you stand for, and that's the piece. When you got that bit of paper, it's a check to write an empowerment from the universe. And one of the hardest things that with temple work is to turn people around from consumers to transmitters. Because when people first come to temple, they're consuming. And it doesn't matter whether they're consuming esoteric teachings or whether they're doing their erotic work or whatever. At the bottom line of what they're consuming is life. They're coming alive. And there's something in them that wants to come alive and recognizes the life at the temple that's coming through people. And they want that. So that's the consuming. And then what happens is if they leave and they go away and then they go into their lives and they lose the life. And so they come back and they keep consuming workshops and coming and being in the temple until the life begins to vibrate in them. But then the hard thing is to like turn them around, like they're facing in towards the temple, wanting more life. And then the difficult thing is to say, look, turn around, like turn 180 degrees and face out and let the temple shine through you. Become the temple rather than become somebody who comes to the temple. And as soon as they do that, as soon as they turn around, now whether they are then taken out to anchor their own temple or whether they transmit through their work in the world or however, now the temple has speared them from the back of their heart and it's radiating out, and all of a sudden, instead of feeling emptiness inside, is the fullness of as much energy as you can channel is going to be given to you. So now you're employed by the temple, and the temple is underwriting with real energy, with life force, with creativity, with all of those things. But once again, it's a transition of a 180-degree turn, and then somebody who becomes then a pillar in the temple, they become an obelisk, that's come out of Egypt. It doesn't matter whether they're at Haydn or Nikkila or whether that wherever they are, if they're in the temple's transmitting. And of course, they're sharing in that transmission that's coming through all temples in the world. And now they are printing their own currency. They're generating it from the core of their own being in linked transmission with these temples that are landing. And so I feel like those two things are happening. One is that we pull from source. Everyone has a connection to source, but then to bring reservoirs of that source here. And that for me is a very powerful thing of the temples, is they're not off in heaven somewhere. They're right here. You can come walk on the land and your whole body can feel this is home. This is the soul's home. And that's really important for people. Even if they've never come to the temples, just to know that they exist eases some part in the shamanic knowing. And then to bring your whole being and your body and to go through the process of reconditioning yourself, replacing what temples are as, again, like laundry systems. It's like taking people out of poison matrices of society and cleansing their gills and helping them breathe life. And then go be that life, and all courage to those who go be that life in the far reaches, right in the middle of business and all of those other places. If they are truly serving the temple there, then they know about transmission, and they know the only thing that keeps them alive in the dark of ignorance is that life force transmission and that link to the temples. So the other thing I remembered that I wanted to say was about investment, investment being a bad word and so on. And I think that, these words used to be Venusian. Like there was like appreciation and interest and value and investment. Investment was to clothe the soul, to invest yourself in matter, to wrap yourself in the great garments of the goddess so that your soul could shine in the world in manifestation. So these are all beautiful terms, but they've all been degraded into purely financial money kind of terms, but to invest yourself, to become invested in the garb of the temples and to shine those. Yes, of course, money will come, but the money normally comes not from the consumerism of adding value, but the money comes when people realize and awaken in the presence of a temple. What awakens in them is the hunger in their soul that they would trade their money for. So at the core of the temple comes the desire to, like, for that life, I would give everything. When that's there, then you're not trying to get money to feel secure or to get a return on your investment or whatever. You're trying to get money so you can help more people go all in and feel how liberated it is to not need anything back, but just to be grateful for the opportunity to have that life force, to be alive in the world as a transmitter of that life force. And of course, the more money we get, the more temples we can land, and the more other people can go through this process. And so, I want billions, not for me, but for the temples. And but sometimes the heart needs to rule the new economy. At high end, it's tricky because sometimes you've got to feel like, okay, the right thing for you is pay. And the right thing for you is, like, you don't have to pay. And the right thing for you is pay now, and then tomorrow you don't pay. And then, so the heart is making these financial decisions, not based on, accounting rules, but based on the soul. Like, for someone, they're at a point where actually giving is critical for their survival as a soul. And somebody else has already given so much that they actually need nourishing. So this is, again, part of Aquarian culture where we start to feel what somebody needs. And also, it comes down, if you haven't done your deep mother-father work, it comes down to some people feel really supported by the mother and by earth and so on. And some people feel really supported by the father. And for some people, it's really difficult to do their contra work. And so sometimes those people need support from both those energies until it becomes stable. So, for those who have money, however they've got money, whether they've earned it or whether they, inherited it or whatever, the act of using that money for life is an important piece. And then to those that give, all shall be given. So it's not about those with money get a good return on investment. It's the giving that gives you the return. So you can, and it's said that, you're better off with $100 that's given freely than you are with $1 million that's got a zillion threads and strings on it, because all of that money with strings ties you to a system that we're trying to change. But all money that's actually part of the new economy is like fresh air in the system. But we have to live it for long enough for people to begin to get it and for their minds to make the shift from trying to understand it and trying to make sense of it according to the paradigms that we've been brought up in, and to really taste it, to taste that crazy freedom that lives when there is some liberation from fear around money.
Yeah, the term launder, I had a really hard time with that word because I was like, my money's not dirty. I didn't think, like, my because I used to, mafia laundering money kind of thing, and it's like, it's not illegal. I earned it, like, with a heart, and then I helped people, and that, it's not dirty, but it's more. And I remember a brother in the Bank of Spirit experiment we were doing, and he's like, you wash it over, and that's the way he said it because English is not his first language, and so he didn't get the launder part. He said wash it over, and I was like, oh, oh, like somehow it eased me, right? And so to allow to allow money to be given over to soul, and then to let that be the wave that you can ride in, yeah, and then to allow yourself to become more and more invested. And I also wanted to reclaim this word. I reclaimed it with Haydn, actually, because 2 months before you put the call out, I had the opportunity for the first time in my life. I felt I wanted to invest in the money sense because I like that's like not the world I live in, and I had some money. I had 50,000 at the time, and a friend said, "Oh, I just put in like 500,000 in gold and silver," and I was like, "Oh, he put in 500,000. I got 50,000. Like like if he's risking that much, I can risk this much." And I remember from my grandmother always saying, gold and silver, like, mother, the great grandmother, everybody, gold and silver, you hold on to that. You never sell that like that because it's worth so much. Da 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 da. Okay. And he was gonna give me all the how to do it. And then I told Timo, oh great, guess what? And he said to me, do you know the only way that you will really get like a return on that is if there's war or famine? And I was like, right. No. Okay, I can't do that. And then 2 months later, you put out this call, and I was like, that's what the 50's for. That's the investment. And since then, I'm like, how could this not be an investment? It's an investment in humanity. It's an investment on the planet. It's an investment in in this whole experiment that's happening cosmically. We don't even have to go there. That's fine. But like, it's an investment in humans, an investment in future generations, an investment like this, like how, and is there any better investment? Sure, like I will get money back or I will live, a beautiful life. I have no doubt about that. Like there's not an inch, like, it's not like I don't even think that like it could be that I'd be under a bridge, and I might be, and that's fine. But it's like, yeah, that's like a cherry on the cake kind of thing, that there'll be some financial returns. That's not what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned and I care about in my investment with my money, with my time, with my body, with my energy, with everything that I possibly that can move through me, is in humanity, is on this planet. Like I I don't care what the stocks are doing. Like how could any of that be worth more? Like how could this not be an investment? Like, so yes, investment. I want humans to invest in temples, and I want those places to be places that are growing abundantly financially, because that's not a dirty thing. Money's not a dirty thing, and it's changing, and then there will be different currencies, and there will be different ways we do things, and we don't know what that's going to look like or what's waiting for us, but we know that something new is happening, and this is how we're seeding it. And so I'm absolutely blessed to be a part of it, and I know it's a very scary ride sometimes, and there's no assurance. You got to let go of that assurance, and then it's like, yeah, like surfing.
And there is a washing through or laundering, I think, from the old system to the new, because the old system is like just so deeply in the financial materialism that it's almost impossible to see it. To the point now that we're even trying, like with good intentions, we're trying to like give rainforests value or water value, because we're realizing that we've exploited the environment, and now if we could give them a financial value, maybe they would be worth something. Or people plant trees for like, and they've got carbon credits or value in the timber in 30 years or whatever. So it's almost like everything that is of valuable in the world is tried to be reduced to some kind of financial thing, because our whole system is in the financial thing. But we don't look at doing the reverse. We don't look at saying, well, actually, instead of valuing nature according to our financial consumerism, how about we reappraised our finances according to nature? How about we planted trees not for an idea of return, but because that is the generosity of spirit that gives to life and gives back to the life that's been given to us. That we don't beat our own heart, we don't breathe into our own lungs. The idea that we're somehow, self-sufficient and have to survive is like crazy. Our wealth comes from nature and our consciousness together. Those soil and the soul are the two great sources of wealth. So I think there is a laundering process, because we all live in such a grimy world around economics, and a resetting of that. becomes an important part of what temples do for us. So yeah, it's an opportunity to actually convert money back into the source of wealth, which is soil and soul.
Absolutely. And I'm just so grateful to you for being such a pillar, such a transmitter, for going for also being the one, you know, that kind of was willing to walk the path and get the lessons that so many of us are reaping the benefits of. I'm just walking right now because there's a lawn mowing happening over there. But also you get to see a little bit more of here. But it's such a gift. So I really want to honor you and honor Haydn and honor what moved through you. I'm super grateful for all of it. And the money piece is such a, I don't know, to me it's exciting, but I know it's also scary, and it's also very yeah, it's the hardest, perhaps I don't know, for some it's the hardest. So I'm super grateful for everything that you have modeled.
There's a deep inertia when it comes to money, and almost an unconsciousness that we have to push at. And my sense of what's happening is that we're at early stages. I feel like places like Haydn and Nikkila, like we're like the beginning green shoots of these massive trees and forests that are to come, and all kinds of lessons will have to be learned. And we've got a huge process ahead of us, but it's begun. And one of the beautiful things about being able to work with teachers like the masters, and to really feel the transmissions from that, is just this recognition that basically the decision's been made, the soul of the world is coming. And so those people who are willing and able to hold space for the temples as places that soul is externalizing through are going to be supported, because they're actually in line with evolution. They're part of the process of evolution. And yes, there'll be challenges, but there are tremendous resources that are building and available for us. And one of the things that I love about Utaki is, even though we don't get to hang out a lot these days, is that unshakable knowing. Like when you feel someone go all in, you don't need to be hearing them claim things. You feel it. We're in a shamanic web with each other. And when we feel each other across the world, standing and holding what we're holding, and in the sheer delight of that, and knowing that we're alone, but we're not alone. We're alone together with all of the others who are alone and have made that call. But there's something thrilling to me, and deeply moving when I feel now this wave of human beings that are emerging and coming to be and land the temples to do this beautiful, impossible, but exactly right thing for this time on the planet. And it makes me proud to be humans, standing with other humans, doing what humans were actually designed to do.